Well, welcome to the end of the year news here on December 31st. What I discovered today is that I've had the same song stuck in my head for 3 days, and I said that out loud to the person I share a life with, and I said, I've got the same song stuck in my head for 3 days. She said, I know. What is that song? And then I realized that she had to listen to me absentmindedly singing the same 6 bars of that song for 3 days, and that can't have been pleasant. So I apologized. So today, it's the end of the year. Every year, what we do at the end of the year is we try to gather up more than our usual complement of nose panelists. 2 or 3 being the usual number of nose panelists per episode. We do have 7 today. And we sort of rush them at the microphone and then rush them away from the microphone. We used to have to do that physically here in the studio. But, of course, everybody's on by Zoom today. So we're going to talk about what kind of year it was in culture. You'd think we would know since we have to do a show like this all the time. But as I said before, I'm not sure we do. So let me tell you who's... I've got to make sure I know who's here in the first segment. Here in the first segment, Rebecca Castellani, co-founder of Quiet Corner Communications, and freelance writer. Rich Hollant, principal at CoLab, founder of Free Center and commissioner on cultural affairs for the city of Hartford. To that end, he would like you to know about the photography exhibit All That Remains at the Charter Oak Cultural Center in Hartford through January 13th. And get over there if you're going out in public and seeing things like photography exhibits, which will come up, actually, on the show today. Okay, now I've lost track of the list of people. Irene Papoulis teaches writing at Trinity College, and Bill Yousman, professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. So, yeah, I think here in the first segment, we're going to talk about just sort of, whether there was culture that really spoke to us. By the way, yes, that photography exhibit is Rich Hollant's photography, so you should absolutely go and see it if you're going to photography exhibits. So we're going to talk very specifically about whether there was culture that kind of spoke powerfully to us. We're also going to talk in the second segment about ourselves as audience. Have we become a different kind of audience for culture under the unusual circumstances we have of consuming culture? And then right at the end, in the final segment, we'll try to leave a lot of time so each of the 7 panelists can mention one thing that they want you to know about. So we should also say that, there's a lot of emailing that goes on usually before the nose. So our producer, Jonathan, or Count McPantula, or whatever, he likes to count things, is the point. And he counted 118 emails that were sent about today's show. So that's a lot. And so, Rich, I'm going to have you get us started because I think you got us started with the emails, too. It's probably your fault that we have 118 emails. But one of the things we were trying to kind of nail to the wall, like Quicksilver, is is there a way in which culture played a meaningful role for us in interpreting, experiencing our lives as lived in the society we live in, or did we just use it to escape? Or I don't know. This is a very nebulous question, but do with it what you wish.
It's a nebulous question. I'm still finding myself going one. Ha ha ha. So let's see. I think that this year specifically, culture feels like it took a pause. And I think as we were emailing, I was having some issues with that. But in hindsight, I think I'm okay with that. I think that it's okay that we have some fallow season. I think also in terms of what could we be consuming right now? There's so much truth or truthiness being played out in the media. So we're living a lot of what culture would be pointing us towards live.
I think that's a great point. And I assume, let me just segue over from you to Irene here, because I think it is a good segue. I assume one of the things Rich might be referring to, one of the things we're going to talk about here in this segment is the movie Don't Look Up. This is Adam McKay's comedy about a society that's unable to process meaningfully the fact that it's facing extinction from a comet heading straight towards Earth. Well, actually, let me stay with you for a second, Rich, and say, I assume one of the things that you're saying is that one of the challenges for a piece of culture like that is how do you make it sort of get a 3,000-foot view of a culture that is already completely ridiculous and suffering from the very precise disease that McKay wants to tell us about.
Well, yeah, that's it. That's exactly the point. And what's a form of distribution that's going to get us there, right? It seems as though the metaphor or the fable approach isn't getting us to the reckoning of where we are right now at this point in time. It doesn't seem as though the media is getting us there either. And I think that we're also in this place where we're intensely isolated right now. And if there's anything that culture has taught us over the years is the need for actually coming together, for being in common spaces in order to have protracted empathy and understanding of the effects of our behaviors or the effects of what's happening around us on each other, and in that state of isolation that we're in right now, it becomes incredibly difficult to treat any of what's going on as real or in any way other than with this base of kind of self-serving narcissism.
So let me segue from there over to Irene now. So Irene, one of the places that you've gone to this year, I just know from our exchanges, is maybe a movie like Don't Look Now, Don't Look Up. Don't Look Now is a terrific movie, by the way. I hope that some people, in the course of trying to find Don't Look Up, watch the Nicholas Roeg movie Don't Look Now. It's really good. But Don't Look Up, or a movie or a series like Succession, which is, each of these things invites us to laugh at problems. In the case of Succession, it's monstrous one percenters, overseeing a sort of Tucker Carlson type media empire. In the case of Don't Look Up, it's a similar kind of thing. So I don't know. Tell me about how your interaction with those kinds of works affects you.
Well, it's interesting because Rich said, culture isn't going to get us there. And so I'm thinking, what gets us there? There's the cynicism and there's the hope. To me, and I think the cynicism really makes us want to see culture that just is an escape. It's not really about what's going on now. It's just a way to watch a murder mystery from Scandinavia or whatever. But for me, Don't Look Now is on the hopeful side.
Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up. I've reckoned every. I root. There's also
I have to say, a movie I loved is Don't Look Away, which is also about the role of art in culture. But it came out a few years ago.
There's also Don't Look Back, the Dylan movie. It could get very confusing here, but we're with Up right now. Anyway, continue.
Right. And I think I slightly disagree with you, Rich, in the sense that I think watching a movie like Don't Look Up makes me feel more motivated or more awake or more wanting to be a part of the culture and doing something, recognizing the problem in a very stark and interesting and also funny way. And that makes me feel connected to the filmmakers, and it makes me connected to the spirit of resistance in a way that Succession, even though I absolutely love that show, doesn't make me really want to do anything except kind of roll my eyes and laugh and appreciate something about the way they constructed it.
All right. So, Bill, I'm going to turn this over to you, too. I know you just watched Don't Look Up, so we can stay with that for a second. But, in a world that includes, I feel like the guy who does the trailers, in a world that includes, I don't know, Marjorie Taylor Greene and her Jewish space lasers, I think it's really hard to do satire right now.
Yeah. And, one of the things that McKay is getting bashed for in a lot of the reviews is that it's heavy-handed, and there's not a lot of subtlety there, that he is screaming at us to look up maybe a little bit too hard. I know I'm looking up, I'm looking away, and I'm looking at the man behind the curtain, but I know that a lot of us aren't. And I agree with that critique of Don't Look Up, but I still got a lot out of it. There were things that I liked about it just as an Adam McKay vehicle, his kind of little stylistic touches that resonate with me. But as I said in our emails, I think for me, the main problem is he intends this as an intervention. And there's a little logical problem there, because based on the very logic that he's critiquing in the film, it's not going to work as an intervention. So then you start really like running down the path toward nihilism. And I think Irene was kind of alluding to this. I don't know what to do with that. I don't want us to go a nihilistic path. And there was, unlike Rich, there was a lot of culture for me that spoke to me and lifted me up this year. But it's my heart and my head are working at opposite purposes for each other, because my head is saying nihilism while my heart is still begging for some type of optimism.
But Bill, so you don't think there was any hope? You think that movie was nihilistic? Don't Look Up?
Well, yeah.
I do too.
I mean, I don't want to do any spoilers.
I was going to say, don't spoil the ending, but it doesn't end well.
I definitely disagree, but yeah, it's hard to talk about the ending.
I guess what I would say is that because I don't think it's going to work as an intervention, but maybe that's just me.
So Rebecca, I know you've seen the movie too, and I definitely want to hear what you think about it too. But I think also one of the reasons I wanted you to be in this segment too is I feel like you and I knew that the pandemic was coming because we read the book Station 11.
Mm-hmm.
and Station 11, by the way, is a book. I think you and I both had the experience of basically just mortgaging everything else in our lives until we finished the book.
Correct.
And so, and now we see it realized on screen. I'm feeling pretty effectively. I mean, if there's a piece of culture that I can think of from this year that might help me, think a little bit more about the situation I'm in, it might be that one.
Yeah, I, had a rich diet of every dystopian, epidemic, pandemic series you could write. I read it before the pandemic, so I felt uniquely prepared for this. But I have found that now that we are living through a disaster scenario, I am more interested in art that deals with the aftermath, which Station 11 does masterfully. How does one live in the aftermath of nihilism, which I think is the place to explore. I think that the art that stood out to me this year explored that. I'm thinking of Bo Burnham's Inside. I mean, really illustrating what it's like to live through a really crazy, isolated, scary, traumatic, and also, sort of irreverent time. And I think that art that, to me, I can look back on this year and said had some effect on me are things like that. And Station 11 is a great example. I am finding that though there are 5 or 6 episodes out, I cannot binge it. I've been watching it once a week and not anymore, which is very rare for this year. Usually everything I just consume in one crush of inside despair. But I'm really kind of taking my time with Station 11 and trying to absorb its lessons in a way that I kind of didn't with the book, because as you said, Colin, I just plowed through it wanting to know what happened. But I'm trying to kind of go slow with the show. And it reminds me in some ways the same idea of like why The Leftovers appealed to me so much. Like, I know that Bill's read the book that's based on too, the Tom Perrotta novel, but just the idea of like how as society we move past nihilism. Like, what do you do when you're staring that void in the face? And I think unfortunately that's kind of our cultural moment right now.
I don't usually do this, but I have to there's often like another show going on the Slack channel here. And so Kat Pastor has just texted me on Slack saying, if Station 11 happens, please just kill me. I'm Jewish. I can't live my life camping. So
I'm with you, Kat.
I
We can go out
double
together.
endorse that. Yeah, I'm with you, Kat.
But there is
Same here.
there is that way in which we should say that Station 11, this doesn't spoil anything, but it begins with a pandemic, a much more lethal and destructive, scouring pandemic than the one we're going through right now. And then a lot of the focus afterwards is on 2 things. One of them is this sort of graphic novel, comic book kind of thing from which the thing derives its name. The other is Shakespeare, or this constant reinterpretation of Shakespeare. And maybe just Rich to swing back to you. One of the other things that culture does when culture's working well is nourish us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be completely, you should pardon the expression, on the nose about the thing. I mean, I feel like Don't Look Up is too on the nose about everything that it's trying to talk to us about. But there's a way in which I think we are kind of hungry to get nourished by art, maybe hungrier than we've ever been before.
Well,
I think
Absolutely. We're exactly that hungry. And I mean, I was thinking, we're hungry, and then there's a pickle, right? That for example, consuming what was meant to be on the big screen on the small box, for me, leaves me feeling kind of flat, like I'm cheating on a lover, right? Because that big screen experience mattered to me, and the translations from big screen to small screen don't always work as well as we think, right? So there's some challenges that are happening at this point in time as well. I think that there is hope, right? So I'm not going to go on. I'm not going to join Bill on a full-on nihilistic rage, as much as I think that would be fun.
No one seems to ever want to join me on that.
It sounds like fun, though, Bill. One day, just not today.
It is fun, nihilistic fun.
But I think where the hope exists is, I guess, where I started this whole thing with, is that what do we do with fallow ground? We have the option right now, and the takeaway from now I'm going to call it "Don't Look Back, Don't Look Up," is that I could take that thing in, much like you did, Irene, and not have hope in the outcome outside of myself, but decide that, maybe I could step away from this. Maybe I could make the move away from this place where the fight continues, and maybe if we all just step away and let the ground be fallow and rebuild itself, we have some hope. But I think what a movie like that is pointing out, and what I've been seeing a lot in culture lately, is this attempt to resolve this thing. And I don't know that we're in a place where we can actually resolve much of anything at all. So
okay,
I
want to swing back to Rebecca, because I could tell you had something to say about that idea of kind of culture feeding us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest lesson for me in Station 11 is being nourished by the past and the things in the past that stand the test of time. So Shakespeare being the ultimate example. I mean, if you're feeling that the current moment is fallow, we have an extraordinary wealth of past content at our fingertips at any given moment. And I found that that's been kind of a crutch for me during the pandemic, is revisiting things that I love and never failed to deliver, experiencing things that have occurred in the past that I didn't get to experience the first time around, such as The Sopranos, which has been a defining watch for my year. I mean, I just think that when in doubt, like, there is a wealth of human history to draw from. And as we've seen, Colin, you're watching the Wheel of Time. It's all just a wheel, baby. It's just going to keep repeating. So you might as well draw some lessons from the past.
Yeah, I think Don't Look Up is trying to say that too, though. Like, it's saying, we have the ingenuity. We have the ingenuity. Definitely. Now. We can
fix it. Yeah.
All right. We have to pause there. I have so much more that we could conceivably say. But one thing that I was quickly say at the end is one of the other piece of culture in Station 11 is this sort of graphic novel comic book. And maybe this is something to talk to Raquel about on the other side of the break. But there's a way in which the Imaginers really did, whether it was Emily St. John Mandela or whatever her name is, who wrote the book, or who the person who within that who wrote this kind of imagined book. Yeah. There's a way in which the Imaginers really already knew all this stuff was coming. And that's another thing culture does, or can do really well.
Do you find that reading the book first really helped you watch it? Do you recommend it?
I think watch it first, then read the book, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
You could talk about that for 40 minutes, right? Like the debate of how to consume it. It's great.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll come back with a whole different panel, except for the Papoulian through line, Irene Papoulis.
Just look up. There is no place to hide. Your love doesn't die. It holds on tight. It never lets you go. Just look up. You cannot deny the signs. What you've waited for. The
We are back. This is the End of the Year News, in which we bravely bring together way more panelists than we can easily accommodate to talk about the end of the year in culture. So in this segment, we'll have Raquel Benedict claims to be the most dangerous woman in speculative fiction. I have no reason to contravene her. She's the host of the Rite Gud podcast. Sam Hadelman works in music public relations and hosts the Sam Hadelman Show on Radio Free Brooklyn. James Hanley is co-founder of Cinestudio at Trinity College. Irene Papoulis, you already remember her from the first segment, teaches writing at Trinity College. So, yeah, I mean, one thing that we know about culture is that there are creators of culture and then there's consumers of culture, and not to get all Harold Bloom about it, but the consumers of culture play theoretically maybe even a bigger role than the creators. So how we consume and who we are when we're consuming is a really interesting question. And I think it was different this year. And James, I mean, this is a tune that you've played before on the show, but I think you always have new things to say about it. But I mean, you've existed for most of your professional life, maybe all of your professional life, in a world where ideally people gather, they watch a certain kind of thing under a certain set of circumstances, then they filter out into the lobby and talk about it with people that they may or may not have ever met before, and on and on and on. And that whole covenant is really disrupted right now. So what are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think it's a major disruption, and it really hasn't fully played out yet. It's interesting that some of the hints of this, I remember having a conversation with a student who had never seen some of the major classics, in particular Citizen Kane, and I suggested that she saw it, and as it happened, she had a limited time, I guess, but she saw it at double speed, and I had quite a discussion with her about whether she actually saw the same movie, that this was like consuming art, making sure that you could sort of generally say, well, yes, I saw it, but this sort of threads through to current situations where, because art is being consumed in different ways, and for understandable reasons why people are afraid to gather, I think that then you have a situation where people are not quite sure of what they've seen very often, and conversation about things that have been shared often leads to insights that make you go back and take a look and maybe reconsider what you thought you saw. And I'm thinking, for instance, of a recent film that really blew me away was The Lost Daughter, that's just showing Maggie Gyllenhaal's new film. That's a film that requires following the thread continuously, and I can't imagine taking breaks or watching it at double speed, for example. But if you did, I think you'd miss a lot of the nuance of that film. And this is something that is not just about film. I think it's about theater as well. Theater that is being recorded and played. The National Theatre Live is one example. Generally, that's done as a kind of occasion event, although I think there's great pressure to go streaming with all of those things. And in streaming, everything, all the rules can be thrown out. You can stop and start, you can change speed, you can experience art in a very different way, and then not be able to have the conversation about what you've seen. I think these are major seismic shifts that haven't played out really yet.
Yeah. By the way, The Lost Daughter, which James just referenced, I'm being told by Mr. McPants, it's dropping on Netflix today. That's not going to make James happy. He doesn't want you to watch it on Netflix. but it is out there that way. So, Raquel, one of the other ways in which we're an audience, or some people are an audience, is kind of a community of interest. And it seems to me that whole world of speculative fiction and science fiction, fantasy, whatever we want to talk about in that genre, is a world where people can find ways to share without watching everything all at once in the same venue. Can you talk about that a little bit? Does that help in making you feel a little bit, like I said earlier in our emails, I feel like audience now means people in my house. But I don't know, Raquel, does that help you open the door and get out to the other people?
I do think that people in an increasingly atomized and alienated society see media consumption as almost a promise to a sense of community, especially for geeks and nerds. Consuming certain geeky movies makes you part of a community, right? Like people who like Doctor Who, they refer to themselves as Whovians. People who like the Harry Potter franchise will refer to themselves as, oh, I'm a Hufflepuff, I'm a this, I'm a that. But I do think that there's something to say in that it's a false promise. I do think that consuming something not necessarily simultaneously, I don't think it adds to a real community. There's sharing a communal experience with your friends or in a theater or even just watching a movie with friends across Zoom during the early days of the pandemic. That is something of a real communal experience. Watching the same movie as other people and then having your hot take, your required hot take about it online, it's not real. It's not real. It's a false promise. I'm sorry. It's not quite as good. And while I understand why people go to that, because that is much more accessible, and especially in the days of the pandemic. I mean, when you're thinking about going to see a movie, you have to genuinely weigh your willingness to see it and your willingness to risk catching the Omicron variant against maybe I should just watch this at home.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just tried a new Demitex in '95, and I thought, oh, I could probably sit there in the movie theater watching this. However, my glasses would be fogging up a lot. So,
Right.
So Sam, actually, I think did you go to the movies last night? I can't remember.
I know I went to the movies 3 days ago to go see Licorice Pizza.
Okay. And did you see the
Okay.
Spider-Man movie in the movie theaters too?
Oh yeah, let me also say I have been a crazy person about lockdown. Don't think that I'm like just because I'm 24, I've been out and about. I'm a grumpy old man, so I stay at home. I listen to records. I make my own coffee. But yes, I did go to the theaters to go see Spider-Man as well.
I mean, it seems to me that one of the things that you do, Sam, and a lot of us on this show do in different ways, and maybe the show itself, The Nose, does, is to try to create that sense of community. You do it both on your radio show and on the commentaries that you write. It's sort of that thing that James is saying that I think is so important, which is what's the thing I didn't see that I need to know? Because nobody ever absorbs something 100%, right? We need help. We need to help each other.
I think I'm kind of a narcissist. I'm a little bit of a narcissist. I'm totally fine absorbing. Like I keep my life very separate. There's the things that I enjoy that I like to analyze that I'll go and look up a book about just so I can understand the ending better. And then there's things, I did kind of miss that communal feeling. Like when I went to go see Spider-Man, seeing grown men dressed as Spider-Man in the multiples was so fun. It was so nostalgic. Like I completely forgot that these communities even existed of 40-year-old accountants who at night dress up in tights and go to the movie theaters in Milford. Like that's crazy. Like seeing groups of little teens arguing over which Spider-Man was the coolest. Like seeing that communal interaction really warmed my heart. And it kind of reminded me not to be so crass, that, I don't have to watch every movie completely by myself at my house or listen to albums completely by myself. I can engage people again. And I feel like I kind of lost that during the pandemic.
But there's probably Raquel probably knows the name of whatever community it is that wears Spider-Man tights to Spider-Man movies. There may be several different names actually for that community. I want to know if there's some community of people who watch Orson Welles movies performed by Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Psychos.
Rosebud. So, Irene, one of the things we were talking about getting ready for the show is the whole question of comedy, the things that make us laugh. And to me, we'll eventually get back to James on this because I think it's big. To me, this is one of the areas where audience is really important. If you don't watch a funny movie with an audience, you're going to have a really, really different experience. And I think we've gotten probably a little bit more subjective and maybe even solipsistic about comedy because we consume most of it alone or once again with the immediate people in our household. So I don't know what I expect you to say about that, but you'll say something.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of related to what I was thinking before you asked that question, which is how much you trust it, like does your idea of something being funny, are you saying, so I guess you're saying that if the whole audience is laughing a lot, then you're going to think it's funnier?
Well, I might have liked Don't Look Up better. I didn't like Don't Look Up. I might have liked it better if I'd seen it with an audience that was making merry. I don't know. There's no guarantee.
Yeah, I guess for those kind of for certain moments, like Meryl Streep, I thought was really funnier than she's been in a long time in that. And right, if you'd heard the audience laughing at her, maybe it would have been a little bit different. But I'm also thinking about judgment and the way we feel about others' judgment. So it's one thing to feel bonded with an audience because you're all in it together, but I think it's another thing. I'm interested in the experience of saying, like, I love that, I thought it was great, and then having people I respect, like you, about Don't Look Up, say, oh, I hated it, and so that makes me think, ooh, okay, maybe I also hated it. Like I have a tendency to sort of, like, part of me has a tendency to want to say, okay, then I didn't like it either, and then I can start looking at the things that maybe were not so great about it. But but at the same time, there's a part of me that says, no, I liked it, you didn't like it, so I'm going to fight for my position. So I think there's something about lately that people, in a way that's what happens with critics. Like you look at if Rotten Tomatoes gives something a 52, then you think, oh, I probably will not like it. Though I now have a tendency to want to say, the older I get, the more I want to be stubborn about my own reaction. And maybe in that sense, I'm a narcissist, like Sam said, just like, I want to know what my opinion, I don't want to read any reviews. I don't care about any reviews. I want to see it and form my own opinion. And then when I read a review, maybe I'll change it, but I sort of have this, and maybe that's what you meant by real, Raquel, about like what a real experience is. Do I have my own experience, or do I have one that's just tempered by what other people think I'm supposed to think about it, or what other people think I'm supposed to think is funny?
Well, yeah, and actually, I don't even know who I'm going to throw this to, but I might have to throw it back to you, Sam, because you're the only person besides Irene I know has watched Succession. But people who read the Michael Schulman profile of Jeremy Strong in the New Yorker know that Jeremy Strong occasionally appears not to have understood that Succession is frequently very, very funny. That might have come up there, or maybe in the
sad,
or in the Kieran Culkin interview with Fresh Air. I don't know. Somewhere it's like Jeremy Strong, who's playing one of the key characters, playing the role of Kendall Roy. And I think I don't blame him, because everything is sort of serio-comic right now. Nobody's making rollicking, madcap, knockabout comedies.
Yeah, thank God you brought up that profile. I think I emailed that to you that morning, and I was like, drink this with your coffee. Oh my God, I loved it. I was like, there's so many beautiful lines in there, like, this is life or death. Like, he doesn't get the joke. And, I did say that Succession was kind of Greek, and he said that in the profile. But I do think that we've entered an era of comedy that I was thinking before. I'm like, what happened to like the slapsticks? What happened? Like, I feel like that's kind of like aired out, and now it's kind of all about being meta. It's like, oh, am I supposed to think this is funny, or is this not funny? And I think definitely the isolation has added to that. But I did want to make one point that Irene said about, like audience and what we think is funny. I watched a lot of stuff with my mom this year. I've watched more TV with my mother than I'd like to admit. And I feel like our laughter is enough to fill the room that I don't really care what anybody else thinks. But I do love think pieces. I am very like set in my views. I feel like someone who didn't really have like, no one showed me movies. No one showed me music. I found this stuff on the internet. So being bred from that culture, I'm fine reading a review and keeping in my own thoughts and keeping my own opinions. I welcome argument, as everybody knows. You know what I mean? I like discourse. So
do you think your peers are like that, though?
Would you think my peers or my parents?
Peers.
No, your peers.
Oh, no, my peers they're all sheep. I mean, anybody under the age of 25 is just run by whatever tweet some culture critic at the New York Times tweets out, and then they go talk about it with their friends at their local coffee shop. I'm different. I'm not saying like, oh, I'm different. I'm just, I think a lot of people get their cultural zeitgeist from their parents, from an older brother. I'm an only child, and my parents are both over the age of 60. We don't really share a lot of cultural overlap.
I know Sam's dad pretty well. I can probably vouch for that. I want to just swing back to you, James, because, as somebody who has, first of all, watched so many movies and screened so many movies for the rest of us, I'm wondering what you think about that thing about comedy. There are pieces being written right now, like, is comedy pure comedy, something that we just go to and laugh at? Is that an endangered species? And maybe it can't survive in such a complicated environment. What are your thoughts?
I think there is a danger that kind of comedy. That to me, there's a broader comedy, or a comedy that is shared, that you sort of reflect on the people you're with people who've experienced it, or even if you've shared watching it online and you share thoughts about it. But the sort of comedy that is dynamic, say with a comedian or even a movie, actually you feel the audience. One particular example to me would be a film that, for example, plays right in the middle of being tragic and comic, and you feel half the audience is like weeping at this and very uncomfortable, and the other half is laughing their heads off. That sort of experience, I think, is in the absence of the shared environment to enjoy that kind of comedy. I mean, I have a feeling it'll come back, of course, but not under the current circumstances. I think that comedy as it stands now, as it's experienced, as has been this conversation over the past few minutes, I think it's something in a way that is a sort of angular appreciation of a personal sort of irony and understanding of the comedy in a certain way, but is very different from that shared sense of what's funny.
All right, we're almost going to go to break here, but Raquel, I want to end with you. I want to kind of maybe even link back to something that Rebecca and I were talking about in the A, because one of the things that I think the past 2 years has taught me is that the writers of speculative fiction really are seeing around corners. We did a whole show about this. We've found people who'd written speculative fiction about a pandemic where people started baking more. I mean, they wrote that before all this happened. And it made me think, when they have like blue ribbon panels about stuff, they should put people who create this stuff, because they're thinking about the future in a much more elaborate and deep way. And I guess I sort of wonder how you, as part of that community, as a creator within that community, do you watch the rest of us and go, you mean you didn't know that was going to happen?
Well, regarding how a lot of times it seems like speculative fiction is predicting the future, I think what actually is happening is, instead of really predicting the future, what they were doing was taking inspiration from the past. Like, our current pandemic has unfurled in a way that's very strongly parallel to the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if maybe some of these speculative fiction writers who wrote about baking during the pandemic and masks or whatever during a pandemic were drawing from inspiration from history and from their own history. So it's not so much being about predicting the future as it is about being able to actually pay attention to the past and learn from it.
Imagine doing that. Which is
a rare thing.
Yes, imagine needing specialists for that. All right. So we're going to grab a quick break here. I'm actually right on schedule, which is amazing. And when we come back, each of our panelists will very quickly tell you about something they want you to know about.
Make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My dad said be an actor, my son, but be a comical one. They'll be standing in lines for those old honky-tonk monkey shines. Or you could study Shakespeare and be quite elite, and you could charm the critics and have nothing to eat. Just slip on a banana peel, the world's at your feet. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh?
All right. It's time for me at the end of the year to thank Kat Pastor for the amazing work that she does as our technical producer. Also thanking Jonathan McPants for producing today's episode and for so many great episodes this year. It's great to work with great people. Lily Tyson, who's become our senior producer, is definitely in that category. So is senior producer emeritus Betsy Kaplan, who's still producing episodes for us. So is Julia Pastel. Jennifer LaRue is going to do a couple for us at the start of the year. So it's great also to be working with a lot of really good people, which I get to do here. All right. So there's about 10 minutes left, and we have 7 panelists. Let's see whether we can do this or not. Each one's going to tell you about something that was meaningful in one way or another to them this year. Bill Yousman, why don't you get us going?
All right. One of my favorite shows of the past few years, and one that I do think has been overlooked, is Dickinson. It's an Apple TV show. It's kind of about Emily Dickinson as a young woman, but not really. It's very deliberately anachronistic. It's got amazing performances led by Haley Steinfeld, great music, wonderful stories that are both funny and also deeply sad. I want everyone to watch this show, Dickinson.
Well done. Well done. I've made a start on it in the past. I should go back to it. Rebecca Castellani, you're up next.
So I don't necessarily think this was overlooked so much as it maybe got lost in the streaming shuffle. And my recommendation would be Made on Netflix. It just does a fantastic job of illustrating that sort of horrifying symbiotic cycle of poverty and inescapable domestic violence. Margaret Qualley gives an incredible performance. Be prepared to cry, but it's very cathartic. So I highly recommend Made on Netflix.
As we pointed out, I think on the Nose episode too, Margaret Qualley has to hold a lot of close-ups in this thing, and her face really does it. Annie McDowell, her real-life mother, plays her crazy fictional mother in it and gives a very, very elaborate performance. All right, Rich Hollant, you're up next.
Okay, so what I'm going to go with is the idea that culture is what you were getting at a little while ago, Colin, that culture is not always about just the consumption, but it's also about the creation. And there's some art, the mark making, painting and drawing that tends to get overlooked in the culture conversation, probably ever since, the invention of language. When there were more interesting things to talk about, apparently, than paintings. But at this time, right now, we are making art. There's so much stuff being created, and there are folks out there using digital media to share that art, to take unknown folks, emerging artists, and pushing them out there. For example, like Saatchi at Saatchi Art is pushing some incredible artists in a manner that we can consume them and we can own them, like Bauman, who's doing some Momentum Morty art, and this incredible Ghanaian artist called Theophilus I can never say his name. Theophilus Tethah, Tetteh, who does these beautiful paintings that are all about eyes. And we could get back to now slowing down this big theatrical consumption and paying attention to the little marks.
Ooh, I like it. Yes, the fine arts and the mark making. I love it. All right, Irene Papoulis, you are next.
Okay, well, yeah, that set me up for breaking the rules, which I'm going to do because I want to talk about. It's not Don't Look Away, it's Never Look Away, and it's a movie by the guy that made The Lives of Others, and it's about that exact topic: is the endurance of art in spite of historical devastation. It's such a great movie, but it wasn't made in 2021. Never Look Away, but for 2021, the one that came to my mind is Halston, which I think was great. It was Ewan McGregor playing Halston, of all people. So absurd, but he did such a great job, and not enough people saw it.
All right. Well done as well. And all right, I've lost track. Sam Hadelman, you're up next. What have you got for us, Sam?
I feel like every time I come on here, I tell some cheeky anecdote about my parents, but I'm gonna recommend Hotels by Jasmine Sullivan. It was NPR's #1 album. I had to drive my dad to the airport the other day, and for the past 10 years, I've been banned from playing music in the car, but it was my car, so I finally was in the dominant role. And I was playing like Al Green. He was like, "Oh, do you listen to Anita Baker?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll play something new." And I played Jasmine Sullivan, and he got very quiet, and very quickly he was like, "Oh, I can relate to this. This is pretty good." And that was my first victory with having my dad listen to my music. If you're looking for something for a little more flair in the hip hop world, ESTG, this rapper from Kentucky, modern rap balances between being haunting and exhilarating, and he really works that trapeze act quite well. So if you're a little older, Jasmine Sullivan. If you're a little younger, ESTG.
All right. If you can get your dad to be quiet, you've really accomplished something. I know your dad, Alan, pretty well. So that all sounds good. And yeah, I mean, Jasmine Sullivan is obviously, one of the big names to really kind of erupt from this past year. So very good choice. James Hanley, you have the floor now.
The recommendation I have is for something certainly about the future and somewhat about the past. A very disturbing book, but brilliant, called The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. Highly recommended, about climate, but about much more than that. And I have to say, it's one of those books where it was riveting, but I had to put it down for a week or two before I could continue with it. It was that intense. That's Ministry for the Future, Kim Stanley Robinson.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much. So actually, everybody has been so economical that Raquel Benedict, you have time. You can really stretch out here and recommend a bunch of different things.
Oh, my goodness.
You don't have to do that, don't you?
That is so much power.
Yeah.
I will go mad with it. Okay. I think the thing that has given me strength through what is becoming the second year and ending into the third year of the pandemic is finding a community of other writers and other creatives, which is even hard to do during the best of times. So one person that I'm going to give a shout out to, I hope this is okay because she's not super famous, is my friend June Martin, who refers to herself as the greatest writer in the world. And her website is in fact called theworldsgreatestwriter.com. She's a writer of fiction, some self-published, some professionally published, who focuses on people with very strange ideas. There's a short story about a man who digs up Ruth Bader Ginsburg and wears her skin in order to save democracy. There is a very interesting procreation myth about Zeus. I highly recommend looking for her work because she's absolutely brilliant, and I think she's completely amazing and astonishingly underappreciated.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think the Ruth Bader Ginsburg skin thing is another example of speculative fiction really nailing something that's probably going to happen fairly soon. So
absolutely.
So now I've got a little bit too much time at the end. So let me just the thing that I think I would recommend, because I think it's something that didn't get seen that much and really deserves to be seen more. I don't think any of our panel, not counting McPants, who has seen For All Mankind, which is a piece of speculative fiction about the actual space program going in a very, very different direction and getting women astronauts involved almost from the get-go and being much more diverse and representative. And there's a lot of other things that happen as a result of like little twists and turns. One emergency causes Ted Kennedy to cut short his vacation on Martha's Vineyard, so Chappaquiddick never happens and stuff like that. I will particularly endorse the performance of an actor named Sarah Jones. She plays the astronaut Tracy Stevens. She was riveting. Could not possibly take my eyes off her anytime she was on the screen. So it's called For All Mankind. It's on Apple Plus, I'm pretty sure, right? And you want to watch both seasons, obviously. But the second season actually did take place this year. The other thing that I'm going to say, just, not only do I recommend, and I'm sure James does too, and maybe other people, do watch the movie Don't Look Now. The Nicholas Roeg movie actually has one of the most erotic love scenes between Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie, of all people, that I've ever seen anywhere. And it uses Venice very atmospherically, but maybe a little bit more on point for Don't Look Up. I do recommend the 3-book series by Ben Winters. It's called The Last Policeman series. I don't know what all the individual novels are called, but it is about a similar situation where an astral body is hurtling towards Earth. Humankind is going to become extinct. And it's in particular about a protagonist who insists on going around and solving crimes, even under those circumstances. So I'll recommend that one too. All right. So I want to thank so much our panel. We hope we can do a lot of exciting new Nose episodes for you. We know we will do that in the coming year. But for today, thanks to Irene Papoulis, Rebecca Castellani, Rich Hollant, Bill Yousman, Raquel Benedict, Sam Hadelman, James Hanley, and special thanks to Jonathan McPants, who keeps these episodes going and then pulls clips that we don't use because we don't have time to use clips, although it turns out maybe we did this time. Thanks once again to Cat Pastor and to all of you for 12 months of staying with us during a pandemic. I hope we've been good company and informative company to you. And I talked about audience. We could create radio shows all day. If you didn't listen to them, they'd be some kind of Zen koan that I don't even want to think about.
It's cozy, like a Cracker Barrel. Yeah, we all be laughing, talking, joking, talking about this and talking about that, and talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh yeah, talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah.